Everybody. You know, we have a great show. I'm telling you, I know you're loving it. We got some wonderful people who have graced the stage. And our next guest is a jazz drummer who will talk to us about his career supporting music and education and the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz. Please welcome my man, Thelonious Monk. Give him a big round of applause, everybody. Here we go. Yes, yes. Oh, man, you're a legend. I mean, you've been around. The family's been around for a long time.
Family's been around.
Yeah. And in the beginning, how did you get in touch with Max Roach to give you your first set of drums?
Well, actually, I had nothing to do with it. What I did was I came to my dad. I was kind of late. I was 15.
Yeah.
And I had been playing on pillows at school. I'd been playing drums at school and keeping it kind of a family secret. But things kind of reached critical mass, and so I said to my father one summer afternoon in 1965, I said, you know, Dad, I think I want to play the drums, right? Yeah. He says to me, you're late, right? And then he picked up the telephone and he called a guy named Art Blakey, who was of Jazz Messenger fame. Yes. And he said, Art, Toot, which is my nickname, Toot needs some drums. And about 3 days later, a set of drums showed up at the house.
Something?
But the amazing thing was, and that phone call was about 40 seconds.
Yes.
He immediately put down the phone and he calls up Max Roach. And he says, I'll never forget it. It was so weird. He said, hey, Max, you know, you're the greatest drummer in the world and the kid wants to play drums, so I'm sending him to your house. Quick. And he sent me to Max Roach. I spent the next 2 years hanging with Max Roach and really learning the fundamental philosophies that underpin jazz, because jazz, a lot of people think jazz is about technical proficiency and virtuosity, and those can be included, but they're really, really not what jazz is about. Jazz is really about a philosophy. It's a life philosophy, you know, and that's what's enabled, you know, myself and really with the help of the entire jazz community to develop the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, because jazz is in fact philosophical in its roots. And at the Institute, you know, we're the largest non-for-profit jazz education organization in the world, and we're very involved at the university level, but extremely involved at the high school level, because the object lessons, and this is really critical, the object lessons that one learns in the process of learning jazz is really learning the philosophy, and the philosophy is the root philosophy of jazz, because it came from the minds and hearts of ex-slaves and children of ex-slaves.
Take it back.
It embodies inclusion, because they weren't included. So jazz, you hear jazz musicians say, man, everybody got something to say, everybody's got something to play. That's a philosophical thing, you know, the idea of communicating without necessarily knowing one's language or where one came from necessarily.
Call and response.
All of that stuff is the kind of things that follow kids throughout their lives. Tolerance. You learn tolerance. I mean, all of a sudden a guy walks in, he's got a sitar and he's from India. But we can sit down and we can start communicating, not even speaking the same language. So, you know, I've often said that the Monk Institute is really like one of the arrows of truth in the quiver of justice, because our kids need to search for justice, because justice is going to save the world, and our children are going to save the world. So
the arrow of truth in
the arrow of truth, an arrow of truth in the quiver of justice. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's only one. There are many things. There are many great institutions. There are many great endeavors that teach those object lessons to kids. So one, maybe two out of every 1,000 kids that we deal with the Monk Institute in the high schools will become an actual jazz musician. But what they learn about each other, about the world, those are the things that we need to really move into citizenry.
They can use that far beyond music.
Yeah, far beyond music.
Now, where's this located?
Well, we're located in Washington, D.C., our primary offices, but our primary scholarship program, which is Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz Performance, is a 2-year degree developing program that has generally between 7 and 9 students. It's located in New Orleans. It's under the direction of a great jazz musician and film writer with Terrence Blanchard. And but that's only the beginning of the Monk Institute. That's the tip of the iceberg. That's our premier program. But we have programs going all over that. For instance, we have a program called Jazz inamerica.org, which is a internet-based 5th through 11th grade jazz history program. And what makes it interesting is that it was designed, we designed it with the Department of Education so that it's part of the daily curriculum, and we designed it in conjunction with American history, because there's so many parallels between jazz and American history, starting with Benny Goodman hiring Lionel Hampton, which was the first time African Americans and whites performed at the same time. But this allows it to be taught by social studies teachers to the entire student body.
Beautiful.
You know, we have another program called Jazz in the Classroom, which we take, and it has a peer-to-peer program. We take young jazz musicians from schools, say some kids, most recently we took some kids from LaGuardia High School, because we work with LaGuardia High School, and we sent them, I think we sent them to Texas to actually work with some young jazz players in Texas. And that is really, really successful, because, you know, teenagers, for some reason, if you and I talk to them, it's like we're speaking Russian. If another teenager talks to them, they understand it clearly. So we're very proud of that program. And then, of course, we have our international Thelonious Monk Jazz competition at the Kennedy Center, which I'm proud to say is sold out every year. One of the few things that is sold out, and that's a rotating competition.
We got to get some press tickets so we can get her, you know, and view it from another angle. You gonna work on that?
But we and out of that we've had some great young jazz musicians. Of course, Joshua Redman, who became the #1 saxophonist in the world, Jane Monheit, who became the #1 jazz singer in the world. And if you look on the horizon of jazz, you see Monk Institute students and teachers all over the place. So
now, there's no accident that the Monk Institute is also based in New Orleans.
No accident.
Because
in
New Orleans, they said New Orleans, a lot of the jazz came from New Orleans.
Well, New Orleans is where our home was. New Orleans was we had Congo Square, and for those listeners who don't know, Congo Square was the only location in the United States of America that African slaves were allowed to practice their indigenous culture. They could play their drums, they could sing their chants, they could do that kind of thing. And after the Civil War, you had this Creole population, which was sort of European oriented. They were sort of the house black folks. We were all pushed together. So you had the European trained Creole musicians get together with the African musicians, and voila, we had jazz.
The history.
We had jazz.
At the Thelonious Monk Institute.
Yeah, you can get some of that too.
Yes,
you can get some of that too.
Psychology, philosophy, history.
Yeah. Well, jazz is a lifestyle.
Yeah, and you said something about the drums, because back in the day when they brought slaves here, they wouldn't let slaves use their drums.
Well, they wouldn't let us.
It's a form of communication.
Well, most people don't know that the first high-speed communication, I mean, moving at the speed of sound, was actually the talking drums in Africa, and it was very, very frightening to the settlers and explorers that came, and ultimately to the slave owners themselves.
But it helped develop a whole new genre, like out of the drums. Since you couldn't play the drums, they got into spirituals.
Yes. Yes.
Wade in the water.
Yes, indeed.
If you're going to run, get in the water so the hound dogs can't chase you and follow you, because they can't sniff through the water.
That's right. You know, so we at the Institute, we're very proud of what we've done. We're in our 26th year, when we were told that we wouldn't last 2 years. And of course, the chairman of the Institute, I'm the chairman of the board of directors. The chairman of the Institute is Herbie Hancock, who you may not know, and many of the listeners, you may not know that Herbie has been officially appointed by President Obama. He's officially the first Goodwill UN ambassador since the daughter of Averell Harriman back in 1968. And Herbie put together, of course, our International Jazz Day, which we just celebrated a week ago in Istanbul, Turkey. We had 196 countries involved. And what it says is that jazz is truly global, and it was the reason, you know, education is a reason for this international jazz community, which everybody's always known about. But we never had a reason to coalesce. And all of a sudden we had Hugh Masekela from South Africa, we had John McLaughlin from Monaco, we had artists from Japan, artists from South America, Milton Nascimento from Brazil, of course Herbie Hancock and George Duke and Branford Marcellus, and a truly international occasion.
You know what? We need a whole show where we can really expose a lot of the stuff that you're doing.
You
Because
don't
you
need-
got background. We got into the Institute, but we didn't talk about a lot of stuff that you do. So I'm going to ask our producer, Chris, to set something up where we can do a backstage with Bob Lee and T.S. Monk so
Oh,
we
it'd
can
be a
really
pleasure.
expose a
It'd be
lot of
my
stuff
pleasure.
and bring to light all the
Absolutely.
wonderful things that you're doing in the Institute and outside of the Institute, because, you know, you've been around for a while.
Hey.
In jazz, into disco with the Bon Bon V and all that
I had a
stuff,
good
and
time. I
back
had a
into
good
jazz.
time with that too.
Yes.
I've been blessed, and I'm very, very grateful, and I'd be delighted to come back.
Yes. Where can people get more information on the Institute?
Oh, just go to theloniousfunkinstitute.org, and boy, you'll get more information than you really
There you
were
go.
looking for.
But
Absolutely.
it's nothing like having you tell it. My
Hey,
brother.
my
Always a
pleasure, Bob.
All right.
All right.
And I got all his records too. I got them. I got a wall of records in the house. You can just, like a library. Maybe you can put that in your Institute. Start like a little museum. No. I'm not
All right. Don't say that, because we'll come for your record collection in a minute.
T.S. Monk, give him a big round of applause, everybody. Yes, indeed.